We're excited that you're here with us today. We have been looking forward to being able to have this conversation with you and with the business community across the United States and with leaders who are working through this crisis. So it's going to be a great discussion today. And I'm just going to give us some introduction and give us kind of the objective and agenda, and then I'll turn it over and get us rolling. In our first call today, we had to take our camera off to allow for audio. So it seems like right now the audio is holding, but if it seems spotty on your end, will you please let me know in the chat? Because we'll go ahead and turn off our video, which will allow it to run even a little bit more smoothly. As you know, I think the whole world and every company is now on Zoom, and so I think there's a bit of additional load that's going on the internet at the moment. So let me know if you cannot hear from us, or if it's lagging, or if it's spotty, and we'll go ahead and take the video off. So we have lots of friends from the Coachwell community here with us today who know who we are. For those of you who don't know us, I just want to give you a quick introduction. Coachwell has been around since 2009, and over those years has served entrepreneurs to executives, focusing on their leadership effectiveness, both in how they lead themselves effectively, how they lead their teams effectively, and how they lead their organizations. And so we love this work. We love to be involved in this work, and hence the reason why we want to reach out and start this conversation as a community today. I want to introduce Barry Engelman. Barry Engelman is from Texas. Some of you may have caught that conversation. He is a native Oregonian and moved to Waco recently. Barry Engelman has been involved in the executive coaching and consulting space for 22 years and has led many CEOs and leaders across the spectrum through different crises. And so I'm glad that Barry can be here with us to share your experience. Welcome, Barry.
Thanks, Dave.
Greg Salciccioli, you can see down here, you can see that there's a name here that is similar between mine and Greg. So I am his younger brother, his son. And we get to work in this business together, and excited that Greg gets to share his experience. Greg had a previous coaching and consulting company before Coachwell, so similar time frame. Barry and Greg have known each other for a long time, being in this space for over 20 years, and so Greg's going to bring his experience as well. So thanks, Greg, for jumping on today.
Thank you, Dave. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I'm just going to give us a few directions as we get going today, and looks like a lot more people have joined us. Again, that poll is there if you can take a moment. We're going to start first by letting Barry and Greg share what has been the experience that they've had in leading leaders effectively through all of these different crises that have happened over the last 20 years. And then we also wanted to focus on two key areas, and I'll let them elaborate on that more, but how do we effectively lead ourselves, and how do we effectively lead our teams in the midst of this crisis? And how do we be effective in those two spaces? In addition, we're going to have some great Q&A time, and in our first webinar today, we had some incredible questions that came up. And even before that time, though, I'm going to talk about that Greg and Barry have really cleared their calendars over the next couple of weeks, and we've opened up some self-scheduling capabilities so that we can get in a session with you one-on-one and really help you to build what's going to be your strategy to navigate this crisis within your context for your business, your company, and your role. In addition to, how are you going to grow through this, find opportunities, and excel out the other side? So I'll talk about that a little bit more before the Q&A, but I want to make sure we get to our meat today. For those of you who haven't engaged in a webinar before, a couple of tips from the Zoom side. There's a chat on the side that many of you have already found, so I'll be posting some notes and some questions throughout our time together, and love for you to engage with us there. And then you'll also see a Q&A button. Feel free to send me questions at any point, because I'm going to start queuing up questions throughout the webinar to allow for our Q&A time at the end. So go ahead and send those to me at any point, and those will be in the queue. If I can answer it myself, I will, and then we'll select some to answer live together. So just a couple things there. Thank you for filling out that poll. I will leave that open for those of you who haven't been able to fill it out yet. And at this point, Barry and Greg, I want to turn it over to you and let you start by giving us what are some lessons that you've learned and seen that's been effective for leaders in navigating the crises that have happened throughout your coaching career. So I'm going to get off my video and turn it over to you guys. Thanks.
Thank you, David. We appreciate that. Barry and I are very excited to share some lessons today, some best practices today. So we're really excited about that. Welcome, everyone. Good to have you here. This morning we have people from all over the U.S., Canada, and some international people. So it's a pleasure to be with you today. And I just want you to know that we care about you. This is an unprecedented time. Never before in history have we faced an economic and health crisis of this magnitude. It really is something we would not have chosen, but it's something that was thrust upon us, and we're here. We're in this new reality. You know, the military have a phrase for it. It's called VUCA. We're in a time of VUCA, a time of volatility, a time of uncertainty, a time of complexity, and a time of ambiguity. Those are some words that amply describe this current situation. So the question we as leaders must ask ourselves is, how are we going to respond in this moment? How are we going to address this crisis? How can we lead effectively in the midst of this context? Really good question, Barry. You and I are going to try to tackle today. It's a big one. You know, there are many lessons that can be learned, and you know, Barry and I have had the privilege to serve and come alongside companies in the last 20 years. And you know, I think of 9/11, Barry. I think of 2008. You know, I think of Katrina. I think of, you know, the situations that have confronted our world, and you and I have been able to come alongside and help those companies not only, I guess, survive in that time, but thrive. You know, look for new opportunity, because in every time there's an upset, there's always an opportunity to grow. Whenever there's a setback, there's always an opportunity for people to expand. So, you know, let's talk about some of those lessons that you and I have learned and be able to apply. The first one I think that we've seen that have worked is that right now, effective leadership matters more than ever.
Yeah.
This is not a time for us to step back. This is not a time for us to abdicate. This is not a time for us to falter or fail. It's a time for us rather to step in, to engage even more in how we lead ourselves, how we lead our teams, how we lead our organizations. It really is a time for us to step up. Barry, would you agree with that? I would love to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I do, Greg, and I'm glad that you alluded to and brought up the acronym VUCA, because I would suggest that that is that those are dynamics that come to play all the time for leaders. I would say if you were to rewind 6 months ago, leaders would probably say, yeah, I feel all of those going on in my world. And then the coronavirus hits, this health epidemic that we have, crisis going on, and it just exaggerates, it exacerbates all of that, magnifies it, and it just becomes bigger and potentially more confusing, and especially that volatility word, because if you read all of those words, by nature they may sound negative because we put them through the lens of our current reality, and our current reality is negative. But what I would ask or maybe petition us even in leading companies and those listening is to turn those around and look at them through a lens, having a perspective of how might they be positive. And it takes me back to a conversation I had with my oldest son a couple of years ago. He's an options trader. And back a couple of years ago, we were in the midst of what we've all just loved seeing, our 401ks grow and steady, and not to bring up a sore subject right now, but you know, I asked him, I said, so how do you like the market right now? He's like, I hate it right now. And I'm like, why? He said, because it is so predictable and it's so steady. He said, as an options trader, I love volatility. Volatility creates opportunity for me. And as I think about volatility today in our market, not just economic volatility, but volatility with regards to operationally how we're running our businesses and how we're communicating with our customers and all that volatility creates opportunity and disruption. As much as we hate disruption is good. It is good for us. Now, I would never wish that a health crisis like what we're facing be the catalyst for disruption, but it's out of our control. It is upon us. It's something that has happened to us. So now what do we do with it? So I just, as we go into this call, we're going to be sharing some best practices, and I would just, effective leadership matters, and perspective matters so much for those leaders. And, I think of, in a time like this, I go back to the Hebrew scriptures and in Proverbs where it says plans fail for lack of counsel, but with advisors they succeed. And so, Greg, why don't you just speak to that piece as well? Because as a leader myself, in times of volatility, in times of uncertainty, man, having somebody ride shotgun has been extremely valuable.
Yeah, it has. I think you and I would agree that, don't go it alone right now. Yeah. This is not a time to make all these critical decisions that are facing us each and every day, Barry. I mean, we're making decisions that are going to have impacts not only now, but 6 months, 9 months, a year, maybe even more down the line. And so what we saw in helping other companies in those hard times is you've got to bring people around you. This is a time to avoid isolation and really get into greater connection and collaboration. We need peers, colleagues, our trusted advisors around us. To release them now or not to access them now would be a critical mistake for our stability and for that opportunity that's coming, because it's not too far away. The opportunity is there, it's coming. Are we going to be ready for it?
Yeah.
So that was the third lesson that you and I talked about. Effective leadership matters more than ever. This is a time of volatility, but it's a time of opportunity.
Yes.
But don't go it alone, because you need trusted advisors, people around you right now.
Yeah, I mean, how many of us have already talked to our accountants and our financial advisors in this time right now? And
several times, actually.
Yeah, several. And unfortunately, some of us or those that we know have had to consult doctors, healthcare professionals in a time like this. So, Greg, I think, Dave sort of teed it up for us, and I'd love to sort of jump into really some meat and potatoes of this. Like, if this is the time, if there's any time to take notes and grab some best practices, now's the time to do that. And let's focus on, I think, two things, as Dave said. One is leading self, right? This idea of how are we taking care of ourselves at this time so that we can actually help others. And so why don't you take that one, and then I'm going to share some best practices around maybe some things that are confronting the teams, the people that we're leading in our organizations right now.
Sounds great. So I want all of us to think back in a really, I guess, near future that we had, or just present time that we had. Let's just think back for a moment when we were on a plane, or we're in an airport, we're boarding a plane, we're going to go on an exotic trip, and we're not going to be shut down in that exotic space to have to go inside when we're going to go visit family, or we're going to go on a business trip. So here you are, you're at the airport, you start to board, and then you sit down in that spacious seat, right? Those large spacious seats that are on the planes, and you sit down, and they begin to go through the instructions, the pre-flight instructions that we all listen to because we've never heard them before. And so you begin to hear the steward or the stewardess say, in the case of an emergency, and the oxygen mask drops, Barry, tell me if this is right. Place it on the person next to you first. Is that right?
Hey, I just want to know, is there an airplane that I'm going to get on that when that drops, it's not going to be there because you took it?
No.
So come clean.
I actually had a steward give this to me. He had read my book, and he said, take this around the world and tell people the importance of putting the oxygen mask on.
Yeah.
within their lives, because they need to be reminded of that in our busy, busy world.
Well, and when we're sitting next to people that we know, we love, we have this natural spirit towards wanting to help, it's that the instructions they give are counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it seems selfish that I should put this on myself first.
Yeah.
But as we talk about self-leadership for a couple of minutes, I want you to think of this illustration that it is true. We're in the emergency. The oxygen mask has dropped. And are we putting it on ourselves? And are we really securing it? And do we know how to every day secure and receive the oxygen that we need so that you and I can be, and all of us on this call can be, at our best to give to those that depend on us what they need? So let's talk about leading self for just a couple of minutes, because what is your oxygen and how do you oxygenate yourself so that you can be at your best? Well, the first thing I recommend is that you build the right mindset and express the right attitude. Right now, we are barraged with media and social media selling us a bit of panic in the pandemic. And it's hard because it comes at such compelling ways and different speakers, and there's tickers on the top with people being infected. There's maps with growing circles that keep getting larger. We're watching the stock market and it's all red, and it has been green recently, which is nice. It's a nice different color to look at. And so we've got to really be careful about that mindset. We've got to really limit the consumption of that negative input, because otherwise we can't have the right mindset. And there's an enemy that's much more dangerous actually than COVID-19 right now. It's called fear. That's the ever-present enemy that's here with us. And unless we begin to limit some consumption and seek inspiration as a second tactic, we're not going to be able to have that right mindset. Our sleep will be disrupted. And then I think even the third thing is we've got to really connect to the people around us. If you're a person of prayer, pray. If you're a person of meditation, meditate. But also seek the people around you that can help us have balanced perspectives, that can help us talk through what those emotions are, that can help us to begin to look at what is truth compared to what is conjecture or what is elevated truth that is being sold to us. I think the key is that we've got to first establish that right mindset. That's part of our oxygen. Secondly, is we need to establish a new rhythm in the midst of a new reality. Barry, you and I would agree, every time we've helped people work through those and ourselves, through whether it was 9/11, 2008, or other disasters, there is a new reality here now. The old reality is gone. We're in a new reality right now, and we're probably looking at peeking into a new reality right around the corner. So it's really helpful for us to establish our habits now that work for us, whether it's your workspace, your work rhythm, your work hours. It really is critical that we reestablish those habits in a new rhythm that can help us to have an ability to be productive every day. And then third, in my book, The Enemies of Excellence, I talk about systematic renewal. And this is really our energy cells. It's super critical for us. We really are people that have 4 energy cells. We have a spiritual, we have an emotional, mental, a relational, and a physical. What are we doing every day to replenish that energy as it's being tapped on heavily right now? How do we recharge those batteries so that we can really be at the top of our game? We can deliver effective leadership. We can make good decisions. We can really gain the wisdom, and we can plan for the future. We've got to really be good in that systematic renewal. So I recommend that there are activities that even right now are hitting your mind. You might want to write them down. Maybe you've got an energy cell that's low because you've not yet replenished it. And so it's critical. If you look at our physical right now, exercise of any kind is excellent for us because it relieves stress. It helps in the emotional, mental. So sometimes you can have certain activities that actually replenish all of them or touch several of them. For Diane and I to have our grandkids over, that's like an immediate relational fill up. and it relieves stress. And mentally and emotionally, they are so funny. I mean, it is a constant chaos of laughter and joy and mess that needs to be cleaned up, but it's all great. And so I think the key is, what are those systematic renewal patterns that are going to assist us today? What's going to add to you? What's the positive? And also what's taking away your energy? And see if we can eliminate those. So Barry, that's what I recommend for the oxygen. And we're in the emergency, the massive drop. Let's make sure that every day we're getting the oxygen that we need.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes me think of this saying, you can't give away what you don't possess. And as in a moment, we'll move on to, okay, how do I work with my team? How do I help my team as a leader? Or even if I'm just an individual contributor in my company, in my organization, how do I give energy to my colleagues or my boss, if you will? So I love the systematic renewal because it just begs of intentionality, proactivity, right? Having a plan to do that, right? You said we are in sort of these unusual times, and I've been talking to the leaders that I've been coaching. Unusual times call for unusual disciplines, meaning when things change, how do you have to change with it, instead of pushing up against it to where it's real hard. So let's go ahead and transition. Let's assume, hey, we've been working on good self-leadership, systematic renewal. We are energized, and here's some. I just want to give some best practices, some tips on how do we engage with the people that we work with, whether they work for us, whether we work with them. I will just sort of allow the audience to sort of use your creativity, as I may be speaking about a discipline that may sound like it's very specific to a leader, and you may not be a functional leader on the call. Well, you can influence leadership inside your organization. So some of these might be good practices for you. Some of them might be good practice suggestions for your boss who may not be on the call right now. So the first one, there's really two things that I want to address. One is this idea around communication. We have effectually lost one element, one dynamic of communication, especially for those of us who were used to getting up in the morning and going into an office. And in an office environment, we were all thrown together in this physical space, and it actually facilitates communication, even just relational, catching up, connecting, hey, how you doing? That has, to a certain extent, gone by the wayside, unless it's our spouse or our 5-year-old that's running around the house, right? Different dynamic. So I want to speak to this idea around communication. And so the first thing is increased communication. Okay. And maybe it's not only increased communication, but it's extremely intentional communication with your teams. And I think there's a couple of things that as leaders or as influencers in our organization, but I'll speak specifically to leaders right now, or for those of you who are on the call who might be coming alongside, you might be a trusted advisor of a leader, is communicate reality. Our people want to know, what is current reality? In a world of just so much mis or disinformation, we need to increase that communication around reality. It takes me back to 1987, a year and a half out of college into my first job. I was working for the largest and at the time most successful investment banking firm on Wall Street. And it was October of 1987. And I can remember exactly where I was when the stock market crash of 1987 happened. And I was in an industry that was on the front lines of the impact of that crash. And I remember my leader at the time, the day after that took place, bringing the whole department together. And it's the first time where I really learned this idea around what's in my control and what's not in my control, and the benefits, the virtue in really identifying what's in my control and focusing my time and attention there. He said so much time and energy is going to be wasted on speculation and hypotheticals with regards to what just happened in the market. And he said it's not going to be healthy for us for our productivity. And he gave us a sense of what the current reality was in the midst of all this disinformation. And that was back in '87, before you had, all 95% of the information in the world available to me on this little device, right? It was telephone, hearsay, TV. And he said, he cut through all the disinformation and he said, here's current reality as it relates to our company. Here's current reality. And that just gave all of us a really healthy perspective on what was true in our life. So leaders, if you haven't been communicating current reality and transparently, like, hey, here's where we're at, here's what we're having to do as a result of this. And here are our real numbers, and people can handle that. Even if it doesn't look good, it's probably not going to look good right now. Like, yeah, we've just had to lay off 50% of our staff. That's no fun. It's not going to be good news, but share the news, okay? Sharing reality, it just conveys trust, that we trust you with this. Secondly is confidence, right? Communicating confidence. And confidence comes from having a plan, from getting together with your leaders, making sure we've got a response to this, we've got a plan for this, this is how we're dealing with it, even if it's, hey, this thing is fluid and our plans are ever changing. And then finally is hope. And I think you mentioned it before, is giving people a sense of, we will get through this. There is historical evidence that is on our side that says we've gotten through things like this before, we will get through this. We don't have all the details, we don't have it, we don't have the crystal ball, but we will get through it. Because we're leaning forward, we're looking to we're responding to our current reality and trying to make the best decisions possible. So that's the first thing, is increase that communication, all right? And being creative in that. Obviously, and this sort of gets to the next point, is, if you were a company that had 20 offices and 200 employees, well, now there's a good chance that you may have 220 offices, right? They're all remote, and they're all in various kitchens, living rooms, linen closets, garages, the tack room out in the barn. I mean, wherever you can be cobbling together some form of workspace, those are your offices right now. And so the second one is, we really want to encourage you to create sort of your unique remote workforce operation plan. And why I say you're unique is because there isn't a one size fits all. Your organization, your workforce is different. Some of you have workforces that are used to working remotely, and you can leverage them to learn best practices for those that haven't. But really, creating that unique sort of remote workforce operation plan. And the reason we want to plan for that is because there's two real dynamics that are that your team, your workforce is having to deal with right now. One is this idea around being disconnected, and the other one is around being distracted. Okay, so in the disconnection, right, like I said, we're all working sort of remotely here. I'm in my home office. Greg's in his office, but he could have just as easily been at his dining room table. But here in my work office, I'm disconnected from the team. So there's certain things that we can do. And here's just a couple. One is, I love the idea right now of morning huddles. This is with, your team, your smaller team, if you will. And that huddle is just sort of it's a checkup from the neck up. Hey, how are you doing? Where are you at today? It's like 10 to 15 minutes. It is not, and it's not meant to go deep into all the strategies, all the work. No, it's just, hey, how are you doing coming into this? How are we doing as a team? Gets everybody connected, and then it's like a huddle, ready, break. And then we all go and we go off and do our work. So that's one, morning huddles. The next is ensure, if you haven't already developed a discipline of meeting one-on-one with your team, that is a discipline that should be happening regardless of this environment that we're in. It is just a leadership best practice. But now more importantly than ever, because like I said, we don't have that built-in opportunity, just walk down the hallway and, bump into one another at the coffee machine. So one-on-ones, and in those one-on-ones, if you were doing them monthly, you may want to bump that up to every other week, maybe even weekly. Maybe it's at the beginning of the week, and really making sure, hey, do my teams, and Greg, you actually brought this up in our last call, is sitting down with everybody, making sure that those that you lead have, I forget what'd you call it?
So Barry, what I was talking about is everybody has a priority plan. That's really their roadmap for the week. And today's Thursday. So if we today or tomorrow, if we helped our direct reports, have them build their priority plan and submit it to you. Yeah. And then when you're on the one-on-one, you're just refining that. You're refining it, adding some things that you may not have thought about. And then they have a roadmap. They have a distraction free guide map to help them next week, and they also feel infused with your care, your courage. So yeah, it's a real good way to set up our people up for success.
Well, and that's a great segue, to move into that. How do we help them? How do we help ourselves? And then how do we help others combat the distraction piece? But the last one in terms of the disconnection is, right, obviously we're on Zoom right now, and I think half the world is on, if not the whole world's on Zoom, doing various things, and we're seeing some really cool applications of it. But trying to use it to recreate some of the things that you used to do live in person, doing it virtually, like a virtual lunch with your team, or with somebody that you used to have lunch with quite a bit. So anyways, just come up with your plan on, hey, how can I help keep my team more connected, more focused during this time? And then the last piece is this distraction piece. And the first point here that I want to make is really, it's just a mindset thing. And it's don't assume that productivity is naturally going to go down just because people are working remotely. As a matter of fact, statistics will tell you that people actually can be more productive when they're working remotely, outside of the distractions, if you will, of the office. It just creates a little bit more flexibility. Now, productivity for those of us who might be newer to working remotely, it's not going to kick in. It's like a muscle. We have to build it up. We have to learn our best practices. We have to learn our new rhythms of how we're going to work and that type of thing. So for leaders, give your people grace and help them through that. But my bet is that you're going to probably see productivity go up. And then the other is around daily planning. Daily planning. I love this phrase I've used for years in the coaching seat, and it's don't begin your day until it's finished on paper, right? Don't go into a day until you've got that your day planned out. I use here, I'm trying to get to a day where I use the full focus planner, and it's a great resource for pre-planning out my tomorrow at the end of today, so that when I go into tomorrow, I've got identified already the high priority, the high payoff things that I need to get to. And the other is in daily planning is I love this term. It came to me when I was a freshman in high school in track, and yes, it caused us all to giggle a little bit, all of us boys at the time. But it was called a fartlek, and a fartlek is a Swedish term for speed play. Speed play, and many of you may know it, and we used it on the football field. You'd sprint 100 yards, and then you'd walk the end zone, then you'd sprint back and walk, that type of thing. You can actually use that type of speed play with time play, in that, maybe focus, real, concentrated focus for 45 minutes, and then give yourself a 15-minute break. Go get a glass of water, go fold the laundry, go do something, and then come back, another 45 minutes, intense focus, no distractions. And then finally is around flexible work hours. You might find in your new reality, if you've got kids running around at your feet all day long because they're not in school, is your best work hours might be from 6 to 9 in the morning and from 8 to 11 in the evening. Those may be your best work hours. So put the most important high payoff activities there, knowing that in the middle of the day, outside of maybe kids napping, it might be a little bit less. So those are just some best practices for really dealing with both that disconnected piece and the distracted piece.
So Barry, I love what I hear you say. In communication, we do have to get clear with that reality, don't we? It's okay to speak about reality. We don't want to live there, but then we want to infuse confidence and hope. So I think it's helpful. I like that. And then, we've got to really be, again, checking with those morning hurdles. I love that. I'm just looking at my notes again. And then the one-on-one, would you say out of all of these, which is the most vital connection point, Barry, for our teams? If we can only do one thing, what would that one thing be?
Yeah, I would say it would be the regular one-on-ones. And if it were me, I would actually, at least because we're sort of on the front end of this, I would be doing those on a weekly basis. And and I love that idea of them preparing their sort of their focused priority plan for the week in advance of coming into that one-on-one.
Yeah. Christy, Anthony wants to know if we have a template for that. And I think the key here is that we don't have a template for a very good reason. One is we want each team member to bring us what they think is their week, structured the way they want it. And, we can always make suggestions, but we want them actually to bring what they see, because it's good for us to see what their perspective is. Don't you agree, Barry? What do they see that their work should be? What do they see as the priorities? And then we can then just add to that. So
I actually have, and I'll hand it off. I'll give it to Dave. I actually do have, and it would probably be modified. So I think it was Christy, swipe and adapt I do have a template that I did use for my regular one-on-ones with my direct reports. And that just helps build rhythm and routine. And because the brain loves that, the majority of our decisions are made subconsciously. And the more that we can build in new habit, that's just fuel for the brain. It's like sugar for the brain. Yeah. It absolutely loves that. So I'll give that to Dave, and he can send that out with the webinar brief as just to swipe and adapt it. It might give you some direction on how to help with those.
You're such a good coach, man. I guess I would say you're just an amazing coach.
Thanks, guys. Some great wisdom and experience. I was writing down some notes here. So as we jump into Q&A, and we've got a lot of time to answer some specific questions, we have some good questions in the queue. For those of you who are still out there, send us some specific questions around maybe your context or anything relating to the material as we get going. So I'll give you a minute to do that. As you're putting some questions in, I want to come back to, I reiterated at the beginning that Greg and Barry have really opened up quite a bit of time. And what I would encourage us, going off of Greg's learning that we don't go at this alone, is that is that you guys grab a time with one of these men to build your plan in this next week for how you're going to build your success strategy for right now, implementing some of this and tackling some other challenges so that you can really succeed through it and out the other side. So I am going to put right now in the chat, there's a link, and I will send this out in the recap, which will come right afterwards with some of the materials that you mentioned, Barry. And this link will just take you to a page where you can download the notes from today and also do some self-scheduling to grab a time that works within your calendar to meet with Greg or Barry. And so thank you to both of you for opening up that time and being willing to help in any way you can to build these strategies and these plans. So as we go to Q&A, we got some great questions here. And looks like you kind of talked, you answered Christie's a little bit. I also gave some thoughts in the text there. I want to go first to this one about self-leadership. So Annika Rogers said, what are your tips for finding the best activities to provide you with the systematic renewal that you need? When time is short, do you have tips for finding the most effective activities that can sort of, like you said, Greg, check the boxes in multiple areas?
Yeah. Well, I think it's when you think of those 4 cells, spiritual, emotional, mental, relational, physical, that there are certain things that to you, they are specific to you that make a difference there. I know for some people, music is huge. So I do want to encourage you to do a bit of exploration, a bit of discovery here, and try some different activities and then see how well they work. Because I mean, I've been doing this for years, but it takes a while to then find that 1 or 2 activities that really give you the most return, you know, for your energy in those. So I just think that let yourself discover a bit, but start with the things that you already like, because those obviously probably already give you energy, and you can see which category that they touch. Those categories are those fuel cells are all synergistic, and they all work together and they all complement. So I think the key is that start with what you like, experiment a little bit, enjoy it, and pretty soon you're going to find your systematic renewal patterns that for you are a lock. I mean, it's like, that's what I need to do. When I'm low on my emotional tank or my mental tank, I know it'll get me back quickly. And so I think the key is that just try that approach, have some fun with it, and I think it will help you a lot. I don't know, Barry, if you want to add something to that, it would be great.
Just real quick, and I would say, you know, I put myself in the place of Annika, who asked the question, and that is, you know, giving myself some grace, knowing that the things that I used to do for self-renewal back when times weren't as volatile, they're going to be different now. So just because I am not able to spend as much time in meditation as I used to in this time, because, you know, my business is compressed, I'm having to spend more time, I've got kids home, right? There's just more demands on my time, and there's only 24 hours in a day. Give yourself some grace. If, you know, if it used to be 10 minutes of meditation and now it's a minute, that's okay. That's okay. Think of a marathon runner who grabs that little packet of goo or whatever it is, and they just take a quick shot, really just to boost their energy for the next mile or 2 that they have to run. So I love those ideas, Greg.
There are 2 other things that just came to mind, and I think Barry and Annika would help, is that we have to give ourselves permission to do this, because sometimes we feel like it's selfish. It's actually strategic. And so I think that's a big deal that a lot of people get stuck. So please take a permission slip from us today. We're handing you one. We're actually issuing you one that you have permission to explore this. And then the second concept that can help too is that educate those key people around you. Educate them as to the importance of those systematic renewal patterns so that you gain their support, and they want to support you. And the more that you educate those around you, give yourself permission, the more you're going to find this discovery as life-changing for you. And listen, to today, right now, all of us, we are building patterns that in this time of crisis are going to serve us for decades to come. So it's a beautiful window right now to have probably more permission than we've had in a long time to explore some of this, to then build these patterns that are going to serve us and others for a long, long time and give us much more life fulfillment as well.
Hey, Greg, I'm gonna use that to segue, because Christy asked another really good question, and it has to do with when you think about it's going to serve us well out into the future. Her question, she's got a couple of really good questions. One is, how do I prepare myself and how do I prepare my team for what may be a longer than expected reality? Let's just say certainly a longer than desired reality. And then the other is, how far out do you plan right now? And I'll let you handle that one, because you actually answered that question really well in the call earlier today, in terms of how far out are you planning. But in terms of the one in terms of preparing myself and my team to face longer than expected realities in this interruption. Well, one is really it's almost like under promise, over deliver. It's like, be careful with putting time frames on it. Like, hold loosely the expected time frames. Like, we're going to be in this for a long time. None of us know what the future is. We don't. We're trying our best to try to predict the future, and we're cobbling together as much information as we can. And I read, a post this morning that, that the length of time of cases, new cases, is actually being elongated. So that's good news. Well, some people might interpret that, oh my gosh, we've hit the vortex, or the point of this thing. And it's going to start coming down. Maybe not. So I would just hold loosely just in terms of setting expectations. So in light of that, start working on those disciplines of working remote, or whatever, Christy, in your case, whatever the current work situation might be that's different than what it is actually start working on making that the new reality. It might change 6 months from now. But you may find, I was on the phone yesterday with a leader of a company that said, all of my team is working remotely right now. They're working better than ever, and they're actually loving it. And he's like, and I'm looking at a $1.5 million lease liability for office space over the next 3 to 5 years. Why would I want that? Right? Out of this may come a new reality. So resist the temptation to say, this is what it's going to be like in the future. No, let's live in the moment. Let's work our plan. And, nobody can predict the future.
I like that shift off of timing to what can we do now to work, not only work the problem, but what can we do now to grow?
Yeah.
We don't want to waste this dynamic, horrible crisis. We want to utilize it, because in crisis, we actually can grow more substantially than outside of crisis. So I think taking the focus off of timing, and rather the focus is on what can we do to refine ourselves right now? How can we grow right now? What opportunities do we not see yet? I had this idea that I'm doing with a lot of companies called creating an innovation incubator time, where the single focus of the entire meeting is on what innovations can we now dream up and even do in the future. That's the only agenda we have today. This is an incubator. Let's innovate. Let's think of new creative ideas so that we can grow and not waste this crisis. We want to benefit from this crisis. Great. So I think taking the focus off of timing, Barry, and even, Christy, if that helps, then we're not so focused on, is it next week it's going to pass? Is it 2 weeks it's going to pass? Is it 1 more month? I think we're now focused on how to work the problem now and how to benefit from it.
Yeah. and then to pivot, because there are real implications, real financial implications of what's happening right now. And some of you on the call have, and as a matter of fact, I know some specifically on the call because we were on the phone Saturday night at 10 o'clock working through the financial implications of what's happening in your marketplace right now. And you're having to make real-time decisions with regards to people, process, those types of things. And so you do need to be looking out a period of time and look at cash flow and cash flow management. And what's your burn rate every month, and how long, how much capital do you have to, and if it's not a lot or any, and you're just sort of working month to month, then coming to grips with that reality, that stark reality, and not letting it cause you to be fearful or paralyzed, and start just working your plan, saying this is what our current reality is, this is what we've got, and looking out. You're probably spending a lot of time with your financial, as Greg was talking about, those outside advisors. For those of you who have CFOs or accountants or controllers, you're probably spending a lot of time with them planning for the financial implications of this. But then Greg and I talked about this after the last call, and I wish I would have mentioned it, so I will now. As much time as you're spending with those people doing battle planning for survival planning, be spending what you were just talking about, and that is your innovation plan for thriving, right? Yeah. Because this will turn. And right now, survival mode is probably survival mode, but the way that you work on thriving in a surviving time is dedicating time to be thinking about this too shall pass. And when it does, what's our plan going to be? What are we going to be doing? How are we going to be taking ground and communicate, all of those types of things. So an equal balance for both.
Won't that be nice? Won't that be fun?
Well, but just talking about the innovation stuff starts getting you sort of excited, and it builds hope.
Yeah, it does.
Right? Type of a thing.
And Barry, before Dave tees up the next question, we had talked about right now we are recommending a 6-month cash flow plan for our people. Plan for 6 months, maybe not need it, but plan for a 6-month increment of time so that you are prepared to be sustainable, and then be also ready in that plan. What cash do you have set aside to also put into new growth, right? Not only to survive, but what will you put into new growth that can allow you to then maximize those opportunities as they appear, because they will appear quick, and then we want to be able to be a part of them.
Yeah, and that 6 months doesn't necessarily start today, right? There's some organizations where you are reaping the benefits of work that you did 2 or 3 months ago. And so your cash flow looks pretty good right now, but go to the front end of your funnel and see how much is coming in. And if not a lot's coming in the front end of that funnel, eventually the other shoe is going to drop. And if that's going to be 60 days out, well, then from that 60-day point, go out 6 months.
Right.
Type
That's
of a
good.
thing. So,
excellent, Bear.
So guys, we just have time for one more question in just a few minutes here so we can wrap at the end. Great to hear from you, Tim, and I appreciate the question, and I know that this is near and dear to you and your practice. He says, Dave, I'm interested to know what people are doing in terms of reducing their staff. So you talked about, Barry, that there's some really tough decisions being made about the people in our business, the precious people who work with us and for us. So termination versus furlough, and why? Are people maintaining the benefits while not providing the hours? So what are you seeing, even in light of the current bill being finalized and some of this larger context? How would you suggest maybe making some decisions about what we do in regards to people in the midst of this?
Well, maybe we can just go back and forth. And so I'll start. The first thing that I would do is if you don't have an HR executive on your team, there are wonderful outsourced HR providers, and I would contact them to make sure that whatever you're doing is in compliance with your in most cases it's going to be your state your state labor laws, and just making sure that you're in compliance. But the other cool thing that I have found, because in my last company we outsourced all of our HR functions, is they can also provide great wisdom and counsel and ideas, creative ideas on how to help companies weather this storm. So seek some outside help would be one idea that I'd have. Greg, what about you?
Yeah, I know excellent idea. I know we're headed right up against the top of this time, Dave. All I would say quickly is, remember, you got to have your best talent when we exit this. So please be careful to sustain, whether it's furlough or whether it's keeping benefits for them, whatever it is, Tim, and all of us on the call today. You've got to have that talent to maximize the opportunity on the way out. And so I think the key is be careful how you address that.
Yeah, this is right. We're in a battle, and so a battle requires a fight. And so get on the Small Business Administration website and look at what your options are in terms of SBA loans. If you've got a equity line for your business, look at the possibility of utilizing that. But don't utilize it without a plan. I don't know that I would just say, okay, we're just going to keep business as usual and we're going to fund it out of debt. No, I wouldn't look at it that way. I'd say, let's make sure we've got our battle plan, and then how do we fund the battle plan?
Yeah, I agree.
Well, thank you guys, and thank you all of you who stayed around and were able to hear some of the Q&A. I know there's lots more questions there. There's lots more unique contexts and situations that each of you are dealing with right at the moment. And so we talked today about the danger of isolation, and it's been really exceptional for us to see that people are collaborating, people are pulling together, and I hope that there was some benefit to you today on a few things, some nuggets you can pull out and apply. But once again, I do want to let you know to just grab a session with Barry or Greg to build that battle plan, whether you're an individual contributor or manager or owner of the business. We'd love to come alongside to be a strategic thinking partner to help you build that battle plan, because we do care about your success and the success of the people that you employ and the success of the community that you serve. So let us be a part of that if we can. Thank you for engaging with us in the conversation. This is just the first of a series of conversations we'll be kicking off. So look for that, invite other people. We'd love to continue to provide value and conversation back into the leaders of this great nation so that we can together pull and link our arms and make sure that we do thrive through this. So as we leave today, I'd love if you have any quick words or thoughts in the chat, you're welcome to put those there. I'm also going to just ask, because we want to make sure that we're providing as much value as possible. Just a quick feedback score on, was this valuable to you today? And the way that you can do that is, 0 to 10. Would you recommend this to somebody? Because we want to make sure that this is providing value to individuals out there. So give us a quick little number there, and appreciate that. And any thoughts you have can go in the chat. So thank you, Barry, for jumping on. Thank you, Greg. And thank you to all you participants for being a part of it today.
Thank you, everyone.
My pleasure.
Okay, we'll talk to you all soon.